Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Melanie Cassar, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Wing Commander Peter Johnson. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Eric Roy Anderson. Eric Anderson was born on the 29th of August 1919 in Coburg, Victoria, the second son of Leslie and Edith Anderson. His father was an enameller and he had 6 siblings: Edna, Bill, Dot, Ray, Mill, and Keith. Anderson enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 9th of December 1941 at the age of 22. A sheet metal worker by trade, he was soon transferred to the 2nd 10th Ordnance Company's workshops, where he worked as a panel beater. He embarked from Sydney on the 10th of January 1942, arriving in Singapore some 2 weeks later. Following Japan's entry into the war the previous December, the 8th Division was involved in fierce fighting across Japanese forces on the Malaya Peninsula. Anderson's unit was responsible for repairing vehicles and other equipment. On the 14th of February 1942, Commonwealth forces in Malaya were forced to surrender, and Private Anderson was among the 45,000 British and Australian troops that became prisoners of war. He was initially held at Changi prisoner of war camp, but the Japanese soon called for working parties to build and expand the new infrastructure across their empire. In July, Anderson volunteered with B Force, which left for Borneo in July 1942. The men had been assured of better food and conditions, but the almost 1,500 men of B Force found themselves on a hellish sea journey, crammed into cargo holds on the Ubi Maru for 11 days before arriving at Sandakan. Conditions at Sandakan soon devolved into some of the worst experienced by prisoners of the Japanese. Prisoners, including the sick, were forced at gunpoint to work on the construction of a military airstrip and were often beaten by their captors. Illness and death ravaged the camp, and food was scarce. Towards the end of 1944, the area began being bombed by Allied aircraft. In January 1945, those prisoners considered fittest were forced into a series of marches west of Renau, a distance of around 260 kilometres. Those who were too sick or weak to make the journey were left behind. One of those was Private Eric Anderson, who had lived for 3 years as a prisoner of war and died on the 9th of February 1945. While no records exist that detail the manner of his death, the Japanese gave the cause as malaria. He was sorely missed by his parents, siblings, and nephews and nieces, who placed in memoriam notices in the newspapers, one of which read, "You did not die in vain, dear, our sweetheart." Private Roy Anderson is commemorated in the Labuan Memorial in Malaysia, and his name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian Memorial. We now remember Private Eric Roy Anderson, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we are left grow old. The age shall not weary them, and the years may not condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen and girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We particularly appreciate your visit, despite the challenges posed by COVID, and wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.